Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and today we are breaking down all 14 Week 11 matchups. It is Week 11, everybody. I love it. You love it. We got the fantasy playoffs around the corner. We need to figure out what to do to get us that victory in Week 11, so we are still having fantasy-relevant conversations in Week 14, 15, 16. I have a very special guest to help me break down this action. You hear him every other week on this podcast. That is Mr. Andrew Erickson, my coworker at PFF. Andrew, what's going on, man?
Dude, I'm still trying to come down from this DeAndre Hopkins catch high, dude. I keep seeing the replays on social media, and it just gets me so pumped up for this week of football, especially because we get to see the Cardinals back at it on Thursday.
That was cool, but, I'd say Cordero Patterson's 104 kick return for a touchdown was cooler. But, to each their own. I get it. Not everybody loves special teams like me. So, yeah, Andrew and I are going to go through all 14 games. Like I said, we're recording this on Tuesday afternoon, so plenty of time to more fully form our opinions. But we want to at least give you one cool, one or two, maybe even three cool stats per matchup. So, without further ado, let's get to it, everybody. First up, Thursday Night Football. Great Thursday night game. Finally, we got the Cardinals at the Seahawks. Saw Seattle open as 5.5-point favorites. That is down to 3.5, and also have the over/under up from 56.5 to 57.5. So I just want to point out that Kyler Murray is literally functioning as the best fantasy quarterback we have ever seen at this point. Right now, he is averaging 29.3 fantasy points per game. That is the highest single season mark from a QB in NFL history. Better than 2019 Lamar Jackson. That was our usual, just kind of record holder. And with the quarterbacks just put up more points than ever, it's going to beg some pretty tough questions, I think, in the upcoming offseason about how viable late round QB still is a strategy. I realize Lamar Jackson, really busted for everyone that tried to go early round this year, but we're just seeing, such a higher ceiling at the position that guys like Kyler Murray, they're winning weeks one after another. And it's just the way that he's gone about putting up these numbers has been absurd because, we saw the amazing Hail Mary to Hopkins that you were talking about to start open the show. Like we've seen Kyler throw a beautiful deep ball all year, but it's truly the rushing ability that's just been so absolutely wild. The guy is just finding the end zone all the time inside the 10-yard line. Kenyon Drake only has one more carry than Kyler on the season inside the 5, but it's just the fact that no one can even touch this dude. Like for him to be that small and that athletic and guys can't even touch him. I mean, he has 388 rushing yards before contact this year. That's more total rushing yards than any other QB other than Lamar Jackson. So anything after the defender inevitably falls to the ground because, Kyler is too elusive for him. That's all extra. He's picking up more than enough yards before guys can even get to him, which is absolutely wild. So Seahawks defense, we all know it's the type of spot we want to, fire up quarterbacks and opposing passing games about. Don't stop treating Kyler as fantasy's overall QB1. Of course, he's been that all season long. Andrew, what's going on with the Seahawks, man? Because they haven't looked like the same sort of world beater over the last few weeks.
Yeah, dude, I don't know what's going on with Russ. He can't handle the heat, so he's getting his ass out of the kitchen. So I don't know what's going on with him, but last week
that was good.
Hey, I got some jokes sometimes. But, yeah, so basically over the past 2 weeks, 18.9 fantasy points per game. And that's obviously heavily weighted by 11.9 fantasy points dud last week. But, last week's performance was like a sore thumb. That's what it kind of stands out like. The Rams have a really, really good defense, and we kind of just overthought, whatever, Russell Wilson, he's going to do fine. The Rams' defense is legit. It's one of the best defensive units all playing right now. The Cardinals are not that. Wilson was under pressure on 53% of his dropbacks. The average pressure rate that he's faced this year is 36%. So he was way under pressure way more than often. And again, he couldn't do it all. He was just trying to do it all on his own. He couldn't get it done. That's not going to happen in this matchup. Again, he absolutely destroyed them the last time these teams played in Week 7, put up over 40 fantasy points. And basically the last two quarterbacks that have faced the Cardinals after that 40-point burger that he put on them, 28 fantasy points per game. And that's basically what he's been, posting up every single week besides this last game. So I think we're going to see bounce back spots for Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. I don't expect Lockett to go over 200 yards again, but he still should probably be the one that we view a little bit higher just because Metcalf is going to have the tougher matchup against Patrick Peterson. But I can't imagine they're not going to hold DK Metcalf in check like they did. Teams are going to just assume, we'll just put our best corner on, it'll stop him. It's I think DK Metcalf is just too good for that. We're not going to see him held to 2 catches for 23 yards. And if you remember that game last time that these teams played, Metcalf had a long touchdown that got called back. So he can definitely make big plays. And one thing to note as well, Lockett is on the injury report. So David Moore, potential, plug and play option off the waiver wire.
David Moore might actually be the best handcuffed wide receiver in the league. I tried to give that honor to Mecole Hardman, but, we got Byron Pringle rearing his ugly head into that. But that's a conversation for another day. Good stuff there. Yeah, I mean, Metcalf, he can win any matchup. We saw him toast Stephon freaking Gilmore earlier this season. I just think it's a matter of, Russ probably paying a little bit too much respect to Patrick Peterson. They've been in the same division for a long time. Russ still might be thinking about, the pre-PP ED version of Peterson. So we'll see what happens there. Next matchup, we got the Patriots at the Texans. This spread has been moving all over the place because the Texans opened as 3-point favorites. Now the Patriots are 2-point favorites. People liking what they saw out of them on Sunday night, and I see Andrew pumping his fist. We got Tom Brady as Andrew's Patriot jersey in the background today. I enjoy the Josh Gordon one the most, but we'll take Brady. Over under is at 47.5. So quickly on the Patriots, love my Cam Newton. He's on pace this year for 17 rushing scores. He is a top 10 fantasy QB option this week against the Texans defense that ranks 29th in yards before contact per rush. I mean, this is the perfect matchup pretty much for the Patriots. The Texans are a defense that we've seen teams really be bullying them on the ground ever since week 1 when the Chiefs were able to just run all over them with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So it hasn't gotten any better, and I think this is just the exact type of spot they want because they want to ultimately control the clock, be a power running offense with Damon Harris or Sony Michel, but that is the $1 million question. Will it be Damon Harris or Sony Michel or both? Because if it's both, now we have a 4-back committee and we cannot live with that in fantasy land. This is already tough enough to figure out. The Patriots backfield has always been a disaster to try to figure out, but there's usually enough points being scored that is worth trying to figure out. And I would just say, people, as great as Damon Harris has played, don't assume that he is going to keep Sony Michel on the bench. Sony has been their starter over the past few years, and to his credit, I mean, only Nick Chubb is averaging more yards after contact per rush than Sony Michel this year. He was playing some of the best ball we've really seen him play with the Patriots prior to that knee injury. Now, Damon Harris, again, he's come in, giving them a spark. He's not been bad by any stretch. I don't think that, he's going to hit the bench, but if Sony comes back and they start splitting this early down work, that's just not enough touches to go around for anybody because, again, we got Cam being the main candidate to find the end zone when they do get inside the 5-yard line. Rex and James White are taking all the targets. We need some sort of injury to happen here to clear things up because as it stands, we cannot live with this 4-back backfield as great as the matchup might be. Andrew, what's going on with Deshaun Watson and company?
Yeah, dude, it should be wheels up for Deshaun Watson. Again, the Patriots defense has not been the same that it was last year. It's not this juggernaut that you need to avoid. But the guy I really want to talk about is Duke Johnson, your guy. I'm surprised that you didn't just take this from me. I was lucky enough to get the Texans to kind of recap here. But I think you just go right back to him. I don't think you worry about last week. The weather was out of control. Again, basically, you have Duke Johnson, the former Miami Hurricane, who basically in his first start, as the guy played in a freaking hurricane. Like, the guy can't catch a break. So, again, 14 touches, 94% of the snaps. That's exactly what we want from our running backs if we can start confidently. Like, I started him in a couple spots. Obviously, I was disappointed by the result, but I'm not taking him out. The Patriots' run defense is atrocious. They have allowed the 4th most rushing yards to running backs over the past 4 weeks, 5.0 yards per carry. That's more than enough for Duke Johnson to get damage done. And they're using him near the goal. Like, he's going to see all the touches, and that's why I like him in this matchup. And I think, too, as well, Brandon Cooks, wide receiver, again, ever since he put up that goose egg in week 4, he's been an absolute target vacuum. 28% target share, 5th highest in the league. He hasn't seen less than 8 targets in any contest that he's played. He's averaged 18.4 fantasy points per game, 8th best. And the speedy wideout, man, say what you want about Brandon Cooks, but he's got a vengeance for his former employer. His last 4 revenge games, 8 targets, 6 catches, and 104 receiving yards, including one against the Patriots in the Super Bowl. And the Patriots ranked dead last in yards per target to the wide receiver position.
Yeah, man, gotta go back to well with Duke Johnson. Look, if people want to come out and say that, he's not starting running back material, go watch his 14 carries. You're going to see him truck the shit out of Andrew Sandejo, have another nice 23-yard burst up the middle, and, had a couple nice shorter conversions. So I understand, I'm going to talk up his 54 scoreless yards more than anybody else will. But truly, this usage, whatever you think about Duke Johnson, even if you're not a truther like myself, this usage is anyone's idea of RB2, and it really is RB1 if we can just get a few more targets and a non-monsoon, to your point. But it is looking like another messy weather game in Cleveland this week, just where opposing offenses are going to die. Next up is the Eagles at the Browns. Browns are staying steady as 3.5-point favorites. But again, we're seeing the game total dropping seemingly because of the weather. From a start opened at 48 down to 45.5. So we'll see. Andrew, we are not meteorologists, but, we can all pull up Google, check out the weather, and see what those wind speeds are. So just in general, people, I like to use weather as more of a tiebreaker and something to completely hang your hat on, for every game like that Texans Browns one where people kind of, tend to just be wiped out fantasy. We also get games like the Steelers and Packers where the passing offenses, more or less aren't really impacted. So use it as a tiebreaker. If we see some just insane, winds going 25 miles per hour plus and all that, and that's a little bit different. But, just realize that in that Patriots-Ravens game, with all that rain going sideways and you could barely even see the players by the end of it, that was Lamar Jackson's most productive passing performance since week 1. So just when we think we have a grip on this weather, just realize it's one variable like all the other ones. So chill out a little bit. And with that said, with this Eagles team, I think with the wide receiver room, it might just be Jalen Reagor's season, man, because the usage last week was great for Reagor and Travis Fulgham. I was really worried that, Alshon Jeffrey, a guy that's been around the team a long time, was going to come back and just be a starter because he's really been a starter ever since he's joined the Eagles. And I wasn't sure if Travis Fulgham, who just got signed on October 3rd, had done enough to kind of keep that job. But we did see that. Reagor played 88% snaps. Fulgham was also at 88%. Then we saw Greg Ward down at 63%. Alshon Jeffrey only 27%. So Reagor had the team high 7 targets. He's been, kind of the field stretcher throughout this season. I think, with Deshaun Jackson, if he was able to come back, I'm not really sure what they would do because I think Reagor is playing that role for them right now, getting the fantasy-friendly air yards. Travis Fulgham will have a better days ahead, but I think, the disparity between Fulgham and Reagor is a lot smaller than we kind of saw over the past few weeks. I think both these guys can be treated as upside wide receiver 3s. This isn't the best matchup for them. I get that. Miles Sanders is, and to a lesser extent, Dallas Goedert are the only kind of Eagles you want to be starting in this weather-induced spot, but keep an eye on Jalen Reagor because this guy really is a talented rookie, and I think, once we see Carson Wentz maybe, just maybe, hit his stride a little bit here in the second half of the year, I think Reagor could be the biggest beneficiary of that. Andrew, hit me with some Browns goodness.
Yeah, I like the call on Reagor. Something I noticed when I was looking at his targets, based on the matchups with the cornerbacks, they were targeting him when he was covered by James Bradbury, which, again, is not a positive EV move. Like, hey, we got this Isaac Yiadom guy on the other side. Like, let's target him. It's like, nah, we're going to go after James Bradbury, one of the best corners in the game. But to me, at least we see, hey, they're trying to feed this guy, get him going, whether they like it or not. So, yeah, definitely like the Reagor call there. But when it comes to the Cleveland Browns, it's Operation Ground and Pound is a full go. They got their key pieces back in the run game last week, Wyatt Teller and running back Nick Chubb. And I think that a lot of people aren't kind of like they're looking at the Kareem Hunt splits with Nick Chubb as the, he's the reason why, Hunt was better. He's been more efficient with Nick Chubb. But it's like, no, that's not really the case. Look at Wyatt Teller. He is PFF's highest graded run blocker. Like, that's part of the reason why Kareem Hunt is being more efficient with the ball. It's not necessarily, he's, working change of pace with Nick Chubb that makes Kareem Hunt better. That I don't really see that as the case. It's really about this offensive line just being at full force, and they are the best offensive line in the game when they have all of their guys. So, yes, the Eagles present a tough run defense, but I don't really care because I just think that the Browns' offensive line is that much better. So I absolutely love both running backs in this spot. Don't care about the matchup. And the one thing I also talk about Philly, so because they have a strong run defense, Mayfield may or may not have to go to the air again. The weather is going to decide that, but I think that really bodes well for Austin Hooper. The Eagles have allowed the 3rd most fantasy points tight ends this season. Before the injury, Hooper led the team in targets weeks 4 through 6 with a 24% target share. And something that I found that was really interesting was when Mayfield is under pressure, Austin Hooper has the most receptions on the team, and that's despite missing 2 games. So, again, the Eagles have a really, really good pass rush. So you're going to see a lot of checkdowns from Baker Mayfield to the tight end position. So, yeah, Austin Hooper goes 5 for 50. You got yourself a top 5 tight end.
Hunt, Chubb, lock him in there. I like the Hooper call. I think Jarvis Landry, to a lesser extent, is in play this week and beyond, everybody. Look, we got the Eagles in this one. Not the most ideal matchup, but after that, Jaguars, Titans, Ravens, not great. But then Giants and Jets take us into Week 16. Gotta love that. Browns players could be winning some people some fantasy championships if they can keep this run game going. Next matchup, we got the Steelers at the Jaguars. Pittsburgh sitting as 10-point favorites. Over-under open at 46, up to 47.5. So go back to James Conner, people. I understand this has been maddening. We got the Cowboys smash spot, then we got the Bengals smash spot, and everyone was smashing except for James Conner. So this is a situation where it's been weird for him throughout the year because honestly, earlier in the year when he was producing more, we weren't seeing that same kind of just workhorse Steelers running back role that we kind of got used to over the better part of the past half decade. But he was finding the end zone enough that it didn't really matter that he wasn't getting the same sort of targets. Now, he's still not really getting the same targets, but again, I think we're going to see him get back to getting 15 to 20 carries in a matchup that come on, like they're playing the freaking Jaguars as 10-point favorites. We can't ignore how great of a spot this is just because in the last two great spots we haven't seen exactly what we want out of James Conner. So look, this is the 28th ranked defense in the league in PPR points per game allowed to the position. The Steelers, are they a fraudulent 9-0 team? Like kinda, I guess, but whatever, man. A win is a win is a win. Only them and the Chiefs have a point differential of triple digits. So I just think when people are talking about the Steelers, PFF's gone out and just really, talked about Big Ben being more of an average quarterback than a great quarterback this year. It's just more that they haven't been, the league best, just overwhelming, dominant 9-0 team. They're still clearly a great team that can make mincemeat out of, this Jaguars defense that we've seen struggle all year round. So to me, the biggest kind of takeaway from James Conner is that when they get behind, that's when we're going to see problems because this offense just loves throwing out an empty now, man. I really don't understand it, but in weeks 1 through 7, the most pass attempts they had out of empty in any game was 6. In week 8, we saw a bump up to 20. In week 9, 23. But okay, those were kind of negative game scripts. But last week, they beat the crap out of the Bengals, and they still threw 16 times out of empty. So James Conner, he's someone that in the past wasn't Le'Veon Bell as a receiver, but the reason why he was his top, 6 PPR back in 2018 was because he was still getting fed in the passing game. He's usually not even on the field now when they're really trying to throw the ball in comeback situations. So this is a spot for James Conner. Again, 10-point favorites against a bad run defense. Fire him up. Just realize, in the future, maybe some closer games or even games that Steelers got to play from behind. Not quite the same 3-down workhorse that we've seen in past years. Andrew, we got Jake Luton, James Robinson. Not looking too good in Jacksonville. What's up?
Yeah, man. And I'll say to the Steelers' credit, man, if I had Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Deontay Johnson, I would be going empty all day long. So, give the Steelers some credit there. But, yeah, James Robinson, again, you guys going to get 25 touches. The matchup isn't great, but I will present some encouragement for any Robinson managers who are, just looking at the matchup. You're like, this is kind of gross. Well, over the past 4 weeks, the Steelers have allowed the third most rushing yards to running backs, 4.9 yards per attempt. And that lines up with the loss of stud linebacker Devin White. So, again, the Steelers, really scary matchup, but not impossible, not impenetrable. Like, they can be beaten. They've been dealing with some injuries on that defensive line. So, again, they are not the same scary matchup that they were in the beginning of the year. So, again, we're starting James Robinson anyway, but hopefully this lets you sleep a little bit better at night. Have him locked in. Don't have any second thoughts about taking him out of your lineup. DJ Chark ranks 6th in the NFL in air yards since Jake Luton has been under center. And I think that you can still start him in this matchup. Again, Pittsburgh has allowed the 5th most air yards per game this season. And again, he leads the team in targets, 17 targets over the past 2 weeks. So all you got to do is come down with one. The first week he came down with one. The second week he didn't because of the win. So, you got to hope and see that Luton can deliver a ball to DJ Chark. I will also say Chris Conley is really cheap on DraftKings at $3K, and he's seen 16 targets over the past 2 weeks. It seems like whenever another receiver in the Jacksonville Jaguars, starters, either Keelan Cole, Chark, or Laviska Shenault don't play, he just immediately steps in and gets targets. So 3-game sample size, Conley has gotten 8 targets per game filling in. So if you need to save some salary, go to Chris Conley.
Yeah, keep an eye on that Shenault hamstring injury. And just note that James Robinson last week, scoreless, but he did have 2 pretty touchdowns called back on holding penalties. The first one, okay, maybe he wouldn't have scored without the hold. But either way, tilting week for James RB1 Sun owners. All right, Detroit Lions at the Carolina Panthers next. We got the Panthers sitting as 1-point favorites. Over-under started at 49, now seeing it down to 45.5. There's some, just uncertainty in the air as to whether or not Teddy Bridgewater is going to play. So I think that has more to do with the shifting, line than any weather-related issues or anything like that. But Andrew, happy DeAndre Swift season, man. I didn't think we would get here, but here we are. It is week 11, and DeAndre Swift has been freed. We have seen him have similar usage, similar snaps in games where they've really fallen behind. They've had to play catch-up mode because he's their pass-down back. But last week, in a game that the Lions, just were able to lead throughout and, ultimately being a little closer than it should have been, but, had a 3-touchdown lead over Washington. At one point, there was hardly any Adrian Peterson, only 4 carries. Kerryon Johnson only had 1 carry. It was the DeAndre Swift show, and he looked absolutely fantastic, man, with these opportunities. Jumping over dudes, just looking so elusive in the open field, man. We've joked about kind of Kerryon Johnson's quote from August where he was pretty much saying, like, Swift can move his hips and his body, like, in ways that I can't, so I really can't learn things from him. That's the type of stuff we were seeing out of Swift in this game, just running away from dudes and looking like the, most athletic dude on the field with the ball in his hands, and that's exactly what, we've been hoping for in this situation. So still only 21 years old, man. Ceiling is the roof for Swift here moving forward. And I wasn't sure if he would get this big enough role because I just didn't see, without injury, why Adrian Peterson was going to keep working less than he was before. Yeah, you can say, why wouldn't they feed their, stud rookie running back over to Adrian Peterson? Why'd they bring Adrian Peterson to the team in the first place and give him this sort of role in the first half of the season? So it's been frustrating, but we cannot let that frustration, get to us because now it does look like Swift is the lead guy here. And now he's got, a great matchup. Panthers haven't been as awful as they were last year against running backs, but we're still talking about the league's 29th ranked defense in PPR points per game allowed to position. So, hey, man, I didn't think we would get here, just like I'm not sure in Washington that we'll get there with Antonio Gibson. But with this usage, Swift is a top 12 RB this week and beyond. And I think he's good enough to really make the most out of this workhorse role that he all of a sudden finds himself with. So great stuff there. Swift needs to be in starting lineups in week 11 and most likely beyond. Andrew, what's going on with the Panthers?
Yeah, DeAndre Swift has the real chance to be that league winning back that you got in the middle rounds. That's kind of what it's shaping up to be because he's got a really good schedule for the rest of the season. So if you have DeAndre Swift, hold him, pray for him, and pray that the Lions don't try to put Adrian Peterson back in the game. But anyway, we're moving on to the Carolina Panthers. Again, Teddy Bridgewater has been listed as day-to-day. Translation, that usually means that he's probably not going to play. I am not optimistic that he plays in this game. Usually day-to-day means week-to-week, and that means we're going to see Philip Walker of the former Houston Roughnecks, XFL, should have been named MVP. He could potentially play the quarterback position for the Carolina Panthers in this matchup. Again, XFL. He was extremely aggressive downfield, 10.1 average depth of throw. And he also led the league in turnover-worthy plays. So keep that in mind. Again, a very aggressive passer, probably going to turn the ball over a lot. So Detroit Lions defense, you need a defense, I would go pick one up. But I think it's actually really good for Robbie Anderson. I don't think that you need to panic about Robbie Anderson. The two played together at Temple, and of his 8 passing attempts this season so far, 3 have gone to Anderson. So it seems like they have some chemistry going on there. Again, he's played with Matt Rule before at Temple, like I mentioned. And that's where the Lions get beat the worst. They rank 31st in explosive pass percentage allowed and deep pass percentage allowed. So, again, Carolina is going to take some shots in this game. I think it's going to be Anderson. I think it's going to be DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel. I don't know if I really like in this spot because of their potential quarterback change. But, yeah, man, I think Philip Walker, PJ Walker, I think he could be in a good spot here. Mike Davis, disappointing in Week 10, but it was a tough matchup. The Bucs are a really good defense. So, again, 8 fantasy points isn't going to get it done, but the Lions are not that type of matchup. They are a super favorable matchup. They'll have the most fantasy points running backs this season and over the past 4 weeks. So again, it's not they just have allowed a lot of points at the beginning of the year. It's been, beginning of the year, middle of the year, right now. So Davis will easily outproduce his poorest Week 10 stat line.
Yeah, quickly with Mike Davis, he's had these disappointing performances in week 7, 8, and 10 where he's had the starts. The Panthers in those games only ran 52, 43, and 47 plays. It's not like we're seeing another running back take away Davis's opportunity. He's still there every down back. His snaps were a little bit lower last week, but I think that was because he got pulled with a wrist or hand injury for a little bit during that one. So I think in a game with more normal plays, Panthers are averaging 60.2 plays per game on the season. We'll see Mike Davis get back into that RB1 territory. One last note on PJ Walker, as someone that watched every single XFL snap, and I sorely do miss that league. But, the funny thing with him was he was far and away the best quarterback when he held the ball for longer than 2.5 seconds. So anytime the thing went off script, but he was like a bottom half XFL quarterback when he was throwing in rhythm kind of in the first 2.5 seconds. So I'm just a little worried, man, because so much of his game was kind of built on this athleticism, being able to get outside the pocket and make these kind of wild plays happen, which were a lot of fun. But I think as we kind of saw when he was playing in the preseason for the Colts a few years ago, doesn't quite work the same way against NFL competition. So I'm rooting for the guy. Hope I'm wrong, but if Teddy's not out there, everyone, it's going to be, a noticeable downgrade, I think, for everyone involved.
Well, I would definitely love to see him because I had purchased tickets to go see the Houston Roughnecks in New York. I was going to drive down from Boston, but then friggin' COVID happened, and then the league got canceled, and I never got to see him play. So maybe Sunday will be different.
Sad, man. We're pulling for you, PJ Walker. We're pulling for you. Next matchup, we got the Bengals at the Washington Football Team. Football Team sitting as 2-point favorites, and the over-under is at 46.5. So, look, everyone, Joe Burrow's season, QB1 season is back. We've been very upfront, this whole year that against the Chargers in week 1, we weren't starting him. The first game against the Ravens, we weren't starting him. We weren't going to start him against the Steelers last week. We got one more, I believe it. They got the Ravens or Steelers in week 17. We got one more of those before, like I think in week 15. So we're not going to start him then, but otherwise we are back to Burrow QB1 season. It is literally almost 100% based on volume. Burrow, he's been playing good, but more, you look at the stats and he's pretty much been a middling to even below average quarterback in most efficiency metrics. Not all his fault. We got AJ Green's corpse running out there, not able to separate from anyone. You got, your best wide receiver on the team in terms of yards per out run, can't even find the field in Auden Tate. And just with Burrow, I mean, it's a situation where he's getting the volume, but, okay, a lot of these downfield passes, I know T. Higgins has some big plays. I think some busted coverage has been there. I mean, if you just want to look at the throws that he's made versus Herbert, in my opinion, it's no debate. Herbert has been clearly the better quarterback, but you could also say he's been, in a slightly better scheme with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams to throw the ball to. So either way, we care in fantasy football about the production, and no matter how they get there, it doesn't really matter because ultimately Burrow has a league high 418 dropbacks through 10 weeks. Absolutely wild. I am a little bit worried about this football team. Defensive line pressure has been the kryptonite for this Bengals offense this year. And, we've seen Washington, they've allowed 300 or fewer passing yards in every game this year. But, ultimately, whether it takes 40, 50, 60 pass attempts, I think the Cincinnati Bengals are going to keep their foot on the gas. And if Joe Mixon remains sidelined too, we've seen them even more willing to throw the ball around, even more so than they already have. So Joe Burrow, QB1 season is back. And please, for the love of God, Cincinnati, free my guy, Auden Tate. The biggest hate on this guy is that he can't separate. What do you call AJ Green doing out there every damn week, man? Like, I don't get it at this point. Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, you guys are great, but that they had chances to trade John Ross, to trade Auden Tate, and they just didn't. So, like, what's your point? So what are you doing with this guy? Give him a chance. All he does when the ball's thrown to him is make plays. So had to get that out there about my guy. But yes, Andrew, what's going on with Alex Smith and company, who, I did note on the Monday version of this podcast, Alex Smith, I think that second half of that last game was the best we've seen him look all season.
Yeah, I mean, they just need to convert Auden Tate to tight end. Honestly, that would be helpful for fantasy owners.
Stop it. He's a wide receiver and whatever. Just get him on the field.
Just get him tight end eligibility. It's fine. Tight end, get the that old, I don't remember his name. There was a guy on the Bucs that had tight end wide receiver dual eligibility. But yeah, so Washington, J.D. McKissic, 29 targets over the past 2 weeks. And I think that people look at that and say, oh, well, he's a running back. It's all like dump offs. And yeah, the majority of them are, around the line of scrimmage. But there was one play in the game last week where McKissic was running up the sideline, and Alex Smith just totally missed him on a would-be touchdown. So you look at McKissic, and you look at his expected fantasy points, over on PFF.com, and he's actually underperformed the past 2 weeks by 17 fantasy points. So he's actually left so much more production on the field than he's actually based on his usage. So McKissic, you're going to go back to him. I mean, you can't bench a guy that's seeing this type of volume in the passing game, and a lot of it's not because of him, catching dump offs out of the backfield. Like, he's lining up out wide. He's lining up in the slot. Only 55% of his snaps last week were actually in the backfield. The other 45% were either out wide or in the slot. So again, we're seeing him and Antonio Gibson on the field at the same time. So it's not one or the other. It's really both of them are being used. McKissic's really more like being used like an actual wide receiver. When you think about it, why not? You have Terry McLaurin and a bunch of guys named Sims. So besides those guys, McKissic really has kind of entrenched himself or carved himself out a nice role in this offense. And we should really view him as an RB wide receiver hybrid because of that Swiss Army knife usage. And again, this is a good matchup for him. The Bengals rank 24th in yards per target to the running back position since week 5. And like I mentioned before, he's got some positive regression coming just because of the raw usage he's been getting so far the past couple weeks.
Yeah, that's what makes this thing so frustrating for Antonio Gibson truthers out there, such as myself, because if, McKissic was in there and just he understands the offense better and they need him to, just Gibson doesn't know what he's doing pass protection and McKissic just keeps eating these checkdowns and screens, that I can wrap my mind around that. But the fact that McKissic has 31 targets lined up in the slot or out wide and the next closest running back is at 17, it's like, what are we doing? Gibson has 4 of those targets. Gibson's been better on a yards per route, on a yards per reception, on a yards after the catch per reception basis. Doesn't make sense to me, man. And hey, if McKissic was just making the most out of these opportunities again and again and again, great. We'd be feeling good about, focusing on McKissic. But yeah, to your point, both guys, I think top 24 backs. But if Gibson could ever just get this pass down roll, he'd be a legit weekly top 10, if not top 5 option. Next matchup, we got the Falcons at the Saints. We got New Orleans sitting as 4.5 point favorites. Over-unders opened at 51.5 down to 50.5. So look, Andrew, I don't get it. You don't get it. But here we are are. Todd Gurley is a fantasy football RB1 in the year 2020. There was a time earlier in the year where he was kind of popping up on, the forced missed tackles list, and he was looking good, and we were maybe slandering him a little more than we should have. That time has passed because for his past 4 games, he has not gotten anything going. He made back-to-back late game, just boneheaded like mental mistakes in weeks 7 through 8, and it just didn't even matter, man. Like, they're still throwing him out there, even though the offseason reports were that, like, the Falcons were kind of almost pissed off that they brought in Gurley in the first place because the team liked Brian Hill and what he brought to the table. So, look, Hill has looked like the best back all season long. Most of those advanced metrics, kind of indicate the same. So maybe there's a chance coming out of the bye we see it, go to more of a 2 RB system, but probably not, man, because right now Todd Gurley is the primary touchdown scorer, and this Falcons offense, even if they're not, 2016 level good or anything, still a team that's going to be putting up, points more weeks than not. So tough matchup against the Saints for sure. I mean, this is one of the stiffest rush defenses in the entire league, but here we are, and it's going to be hard to, rank more than 12 or 13 or so running backs ahead of Gurley because all he's doing is scoring touchdowns, and hey, maybe they regress at some point, but certainly doesn't seem like another, Falcons running back is going to be the guy to stick him on the bench. Again, none of us get it, but that's the way it is. We got to adjust accordingly here moving forward. Don't freak out. I would be shocked if he, finishes the year with 16 touchdowns. But even if, you've been watching old dusty Todd Gurley and just don't think he has it anymore, we got to realize that whatever he has, it has been good for fantasy production to this point. Andrew, what's going on with Jameis Winston and company?
Yeah, where Jameis Winston hopefully can get Michael Thomas to not finish outside the top 45 wide receivers on a weekly basis. Right now, Michael Thomas has finished as the wide receiver 80, wide receiver 49, and wide receiver 70 in his 3 games played this season. That's not going to get it done for a first-round pick that we all took in the first round, middle of the first round. I didn't take him, but, that's for another day. So Jameis Winston, again, he's coming in. His style of play is aggressive down the field. His average depth of target since 2019 ranks number 1 in the NFL. Drew Brees, 32nd in the NFL. So again, we can't necessarily guarantee that Winston's going to come in and automatically just be the same gunslinger. Again, it's a new offense. It's not Bruce Arians kind of calling the plays anymore. So could he be more conservative? Yeah, but I think at the same time, when the pocket breaks, I just think that, Jameis Winston's instincts are going to take over, and he's just going to try to, fit it in a tight window where Breeze would just check it down to Kamara. So I think this could be potentially really good for Michael Thomas. Again, Michael Thomas isn't really known as being a deep threat receiver, but he's actually been really productive on deep threats, except the reason why he's not really known as one is just because he sees so many targets in general that his deep targets don't really stick out. But when he is targeted deep, he's really good. His target rate in 2019 on vertical routes was 18.3%, which was higher than Stephon Diggs and Tyreek Hill. His catch rate on passes thrown 20 or more yards downfield, 87.5%, number 1 in the NFL. So Michael Thomas, I think this is finally a game we're going to finally see him actually continue to be a wide receiver 1. So I think he's a prime buy low candidate right now before he has a big game against playing the Falcons. Okay, he's going to get Kendall Sheffield, PFF's lowest graded cornerback. He is awful. It's just like, this is a sweet spot for Michael Thomas. And I think Jameis Winston's in a good spot as well. As a streaming quarterback. Again, a lot of quarterbacks have gotten hurt, so we need options to pick up off the waiver wire. Since week 6, we have the 4 quarterbacks they have faced have thrown for at least 300 yards. Their defense has been a little bit better since they've got rid of Dan Quinn, but Winston is at least good for multiple touchdowns. That's what he's done basically in his history against the Atlanta Falcons playing as a Buccaneer. So I think Winston, you want to go for a ride, then yeah, play Jameis Winston this week.
We will see, man. I'm with you. I think we'll see, Jameis, when push comes to shove, get back to his, DGAF gunslinger mentality. But that 5.1 yard average target depth, his previous career low mark in a single game was 7.6. So truly, this was like the most conservative version of Jameis we ever saw. Didn't look good. I think there is going to be a fair amount, of just Taysom Hill being more involved. I understand that, when Teddy Bridgewater was out there last year, we actually saw less Taysom Hill. But now there's 16.3 million reasons why they're going to try to get Taysom a little bit more involved moving forward. So I'm a little bit more, I think, just lower on Jameis than the consensus this week, but hope I'm wrong. I just think a lot of his fantasy value has come from that just fearless, reckless gunslinger style, and I think, Peyton and company, they're at least trying to condition that out of him. So obviously good for Jameis's, trying to become a real-life quarterback. That's the goal for Jameis. It should be the goal for Jameis, but for us, fantasy footballers out there still living in our mom's basement and all that, we prefer the Jameis Winston that's going to be playing YOLO ball. Not sure that's the one we're getting. We have, let's see, everybody, 7 more matchups. Thank you as always for sticking with us. Titans and Ravens next. Baltimore sitting at 6.5-point favorites favorites. Over-unders at 48.5. So, look, Derrick Henry, we've had Deontay Foreman getting a little bit annoyingly involved. Jeremy McNichols doing his thing. It's okay, everybody. Derrick Henry is here. Winter is coming. Everything is going to be A-okay. I've said this stat in a few podcasts before, but, it still just blows my mind every time I look at it because it makes sense. Who wants to tackle Derrick Henry, period, and particularly when things get cold? I mean, in September in his career, he's averaged 3.88 yards per carry. October, 4.33. November, 5.6. December, 5.4. And January, 5.2. So truly, as the weather gets colder, Derrick Henry just gets stronger. They feed him the ball more than ever. And I think now against the Ravens defense that, we saw have a lot of trouble with Damian Harris just running right up the middle at him pretty much the whole game. Last time we saw Derrick Henry against these guys, 195 yards on 30 carries back in that AFC divisional round matchup. Continue to treat Derrick Henry as the top 5 running back that we've seen him function as pretty much for the better part of the last 18, 24 months or so. Only other point I will make, it's always A.J. Brown wide receiver 1 season. You really think I'm going to let 1 week throw me off that perch? Absolutely not. How many wide receivers can even get open enough to drop a 70-yard touchdown in the first place? We really want to hold that against the guy. The only thing I will say, man, this thing, look, I am not on the Instagram game. I'm not quite with all you Gen Z kids out there trying to figure that out. As a scholar and just an old-timer like myself, I just don't really have time for it. But anyway, it was brought to my attention last night by a very friendly Twitter follower. Shout out at 4th and Stormy. AJ Brown, not happy, man. He Instagrammed, to all the ones I hurt in the process, I'm sorry, I tried my best, with a broken heart emoji. Like, what's going on, AJB? Dude, I've been Twitter searching his name all day, trying to see if there's an update or what. I don't know what's going on here. It's just kind of a, just regular picture of him just out there in pregame. I'm worried, man. I really hope there's no suspension or something. Maybe he's just taking that drop especially hard. Maybe it's every scenario has gone through my mind about what this could be, man. But assuming that A.J. Brown is healthy and he's in, good graces with the league and the Titans continue to treat him as a top 12 wide receiver, he's been pretty much every single week of the last, season and a half. So, Andrew, other than being worried about our guy A.J. Brown, talking about the Baltimore Ravens.
I mean, worst comes to worst, you just go get Corey Davis.
Stop it.
All right, so the Baltimore Ravens, yeah, it's been a tough sledding for these skill players here. So Lamar Jackson's good spot. Mark Andrews, tight end, finally actually looked pretty decent last week. Actually got involved against arguably the worst matchup on paper against the Patriots. And Nick Boyle's no longer involved. So there really isn't any excuse for Mark Andrews not to produce anymore. There's no one else to really take targets, at least at tight end. So Mark Andrews, you can feel really confident about moving forward. Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, where are you, man? I mean, the usage is there, and that's the thing that's super frustrating. I mean, one thing, if Marquise Brown wasn't getting targeted, you could just say, whatever, get rid of him, it doesn't matter. But he ranks so high in air yard share, end zone target percentage, and the matchup is good here. It's here. The Titans have faced the second most end zone targets of wide receivers, the 8th most air yards per game. Like, this is a good spot for him. And I would make the argument the last couple of weeks haven't really been great matchups. Again, the Steelers, the Colts, the Patriots in the rain. Like, dude, like the fact that they were playing at that last drive when it was absolutely torrential downpour, and I'm just like laughing, like Lamar's trying to drop back to throw. I'm like, dude, this is impossible. Like, what is going on? Of course I can't complete any passes. So I'm willing to go back to Marquise Brown. I think we got to look at receivers fluidly. You can't just look at everything last week and just be, oh, he sucks, like he's over. Like, receiver production is so volatile, and Marquise Brown is that player. Again, he's not a player you start every week. You got to look at your other options, but all the signs are pointing that this is a good spot for him against the Tennessee Titans. And again, this is a matchup that he blew up last year in the playoffs. 7 catches for 126 yards against this same Tennessee Titans team. This Titans team knows how to stop the run game of the Baltimore Ravens. So they may have to take to the air to throw. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work, but I don't mind going back to Marquise Brown as wide receiver 3 option. At the running back position, again, it sucks because we have arguably one of the most effective rushing teams, but it's impossible to figure out which running back to play. J.K. Dobbins is still probably my favorite to play as an RB3 option. Again, you don't love it, but it's a really good matchup, and he played the most snaps last week, and he can probably do the most with the least amount of touches. His breakaway percentage ranks 3rd best in the NFL. He's involved the most as a pass catcher, so yeah, it's not. I don't feel great about it, but yeah, that's the Ravens.
Yeah, I've been saying Marquise Brown, squeaky wheel week. Now this will be the third straight week if we want to go down that path again. But, at some point, it is a situation with these, kind of outside field stretching talents. It is going to be, more volatile than most. We've seen that, Michael Gallup and some of these other guys around the year. So, yeah, at some point it is going to be Hollywood Brown. But to your point, he certainly isn't a guy that we can expect, weekly wide receiver 2 production from. We've seen that here over the past, 2.5 months. Next matchup, we got the Jets at the Chargers. Chargers opened up as 10-point favorites, down to 8.5, game total sticking at 46.5. So Joe Flacco, I mean, look, they had the bye week last week. This dude was chucking the rock around against the Patriots a couple weeks ago and looking freaking good doing so, man. I'm not saying go out there and play Joe Flacco. I have him ranked 27th among 28 quarterbacks this week, but it just was cool to see Denzel Mims, Brashad Perryman, and Jamison Crowder out there making some plays, and it was enough to kind of get everyone on this, Trevor Lawrence, where's he going to go argument. It was enough to make people say, oh, he's, should be pumped about going to the Jets. And I don't know. I think the Jets versus the Jaguars is a pretty, reasonable conversation. You're assuming that probably, both coaching staffs are going to be fired, so we don't have the Gase factor working there. I understand Mims, Perryman, and Crowder, that's a solid wide receiver core, but you could say Chark, Chenault, and, whoever else they're going to eventually add, not too bad in their own right. So, running games, whatever. We know running backs don't matter. The offensive line's defenses, pretty even. So it's like, do you want to go deal with that New York Jets media, or do you want to go to Florida and deal with, that no state income tax? So I think the latter point is what swung it. When I talked to some of my Twitter followers about this, the kind of overwhelming answer was Jacksonville for the no state income tax. But I do think it's interesting because, people maybe are overrating these wide receivers a little bit in this discussion. But with that said, ever since Mims has come back, he's looked really good. Perryman's, been really running by dudes whenever he's been healthy with the Browns, Buccaneers, and now the Jets. And obviously Crowder, when he's been force-fed targets, he's been able to produce as well. So I think with Flacco under center, it's hurting Crowder because we're seeing him more willing to throw downfield to Perryman and Mims. But come on, he still only threw 25 passes in that game. Gase still wants to give the ball to Gorham Pirine. I've already talked far too long about the New York Jets offense. Don't start any of them if you can help it. If you do need someone, though, just realize that these wide receivers are the only spot that I would want to go. But even then, it's going to be hard to fit any of them, higher than, that kind of 35, 36 wide receiver 3 to 4 borderline mark. Andrew, what's going on with Justin Herbert and the Chargers?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about, one former New York Jets running back that you can start this week. My guy, Kalen Ballage, is no mirage. That's what's going to happen, okay? So the often ridiculed running back has looked nothing like he did with the Miami Dolphins. Again, guys, situation matters, okay? It's like a real thing. Past 2 weeks, he has rushed for more yards than he did in all of 2019 on 41 fewer carries. So he was at 1.8 yards per carry last year. He's gotten much, much better. And he's getting all the usage. Apparently, the Chargers absolutely just hate Joshua Kelly. He is the locked-in running back 2 no matter what. Whoever is in front of him, it doesn't matter. Joshua Kelly's always the running back 2. He had his fewest rushing attempts in Week 10, just 7. So that kind of adds fuel to the fire that Ballage is the go-to guy and set up to produce this week as long as Austin Eckler remains sidelined. I don't think Eckler's going to come back. I know we saw that social media post of him running. It's like, oh man, he's running straight. This is good. But I still think he's a few weeks away. And last week, again, 23 touches for Ballage, 102 yards, 73% snap share. This is what we want. This is running back 1 usage, and he's playing the freaking New York Jets in a revenge game against Adam Gase, the guy that wanted to trade for him. So it's Kalen Ballage. Yeah, that's that. That's it.
Revenge games are real, everybody. Don't let that Duke Johnson game turn you off. Look at the Cordero Patterson game, Stick to that recency bias that we all know and love. Yeah, man, I said on the, if you want to hear my full waiver wire thoughts, check out the Tuesday edition of this podcast. But yeah, Kalen Ballage, after doing some research on Eckler, apparently on a Twitch stream about a week ago, Eckler said that he's hoping for a Week 13 comeback. So to me, Ballage seems like he's going to have, the featured role this week and next week. I'm not as confident in some of these other streamer running backs. So yeah, man, Kalen Ballage, fire him up as a top 20 option. We've come a long way from last year, just him having the volume and us just being like, no, you can't play him anyway. But this is how we are. It's okay for NFL players to get better in new situations. And as we've seen, with Brashad Perryman last year, Nelson Aguilar for parts this year, don't let your past opinion of a player cloud their newfound situation where they can be, a relevant fantasy asset. I think that's exactly what we're seeing here with Kalen Ballage. And credit to him for, keeping his head on his shoulders, dealing with the hate and going out there and producing. Erickson. So good story there. Next matchup, we got the Dolphins at the Broncos. Dolphins sitting as 3-point favorites, over under 45.5. Tua as a starter is 3-0. He's playing turnover-free football. He's doing the right things. He is not someone that we want to focus on in fantasy football land. They're just not asking him to do really anything at this point. He's thrown 22, 28, and 25 passes. He's an athletic guy. Like, he's earned, these Russell Wilson comparisons, and you watched him play at Alabama, and you've seen kind of some of that off-script style seeping into the NFL. Like, he's hardly a statue in the pocket, but he's never made a habit of taking off and running. I think at Bama, he either had 0 or only 1 game where he had at least even 50 rushing yards. I understand sacks count against rushing yards in college, but either way, through 3 games this year, only 15 carries for 34 yards and no scores on the ground. So we don't have a rushing floor. We have a very limited passing game ceiling, and now it's just at a point where you take Preston Williams out of the picture. Mike Gesicki's playing like more of a real-life inline tight end now instead of being out in the slot. We have Jakeem Grant as a number 2 guy. Jakeem Grant's explosive. He's fine. Probably shouldn't be your NFL team's number 2 wide receiver. And Devontae Parker, he's been playing banged up all year. Just can't get the targets. Look, it's a winnable matchup. I realize the Broncos with all these injuries, haven't been the same defense, but don't be sleeping on the fact that we got the Dolphins going from Miami all the way out west to Denver. Never an easy place to play, at Mile High. And then Vic Fangio, to me, like the Broncos are like the 49ers, where when they play one of these just highly talented offenses that knows what they're doing, okay, like they just don't really have the talent on the defensive side of the ball to keep up with some of these great teams. But this is still a very well-coached defense that I think could give a rookie quarterback such as Tua a lot of trouble. So even in a better matchup, man, it's really tough to trust Tua and this passing game just because of the lack of volume. And now I think this is an underrated tough spot. I do think we probably see Tua's first floor game in the NFL here this week. So really, other than Salvin Ahmed, who as long as Matt Breida remains sidelined, even if he doesn't, I think Ahmed's kind of earned that borderline RB2 value. I would kind of expect Breida to come back as the pass down back mainly. But Myles Gaskin's eligible to return last week. Could be wrong about Breida. Don't trust this backfield too much because again, I just think the overall scoring ceiling with the Dolphins offense this week is at a very low point. What's going on with Drew Lock and company, Andrew?
Yeah, Drew Lock. After, I looked at a stat the last 2 weeks where I was looking at Drew Lock. He had 82% of his fantasy points in the fourth quarter. So I was hoping during that last fourth quarter last week that he would get his fantasy points, but to no avail that it came through. Again, Drew Lock was dealing with some injury during that game. So again, that may have influenced his play, but again, it's pretty erratic quarterback play from him so far. It's just all he's doing is chucking the ball deep, and that's just not enough to sustain drives and to actually be an efficient quarterback. But it's good enough for us. For Jerry Jeudy, again, he leads all receivers in air yards over the past 3 weeks, 530. That's a lot. He also leads in routes run, 133, and he's also 4th in targets over the past 3 weeks. So you can't. Jerry Jeudy is a start. It doesn't really matter. I don't care about Miami. Oh, they have good outside corners. Don't care. Jerry Jeudy. You just watch this guy get open. He's open by it seems like 2 to 3 yards all the time. He can just make separation like a rookie receiver I've never really seen. And again, Drew Lock, he's good enough to at least get on the ball. Hopefully, if it takes 14 targets to get 6 catches, well, we'll take it. So I'm not concerned about Jeudy in the matchup against a resurging Miami Dolphins defense, but I am concerned about this running game for the Denver Broncos. Melvin Gordon, 64 rushing yards on 18 carries the past 2 weeks, and just 1 catch. So that was kind of what we were getting out of Melvin Gordon was hey, he's got the pass catching usage. We can at least fall back on that. But even that's not happening because Drew Lock, again, is just looking downfield. He's looking for his wide receivers. So again, you never RB committees are bad enough as it is because he's still splitting snaps with Philip Lindsay. But then you throw in a bad matchup. That's kind of where I want to stay away. Again, Miami's defense allowed the 7th fewest fantasy points to running backs over the past 4 weeks, just 3.6 yards per attempt. So yeah, I'm going to stay away from the running backs, but Jerry Jeudy is in a smash spot.
Agreed. Yeah, Gordon actually, I thought, had his best game of the year last week in terms of breaking tackles and just looking really good with the ball in his hands. Not enough volume, and ultimately had, I think, 46 scoreless yards. So credit to him for, turning around a little bit in real life. But yeah, I don't think this is an offense that we want much to do with other than Jerry Jeudy and potentially Noah Fant. Next game, we got the Packers at the Colts. Green Bay opened as 2.5-point favorites. Now we're seeing the Colts as 2.5-point favorites. So interesting line movement going on there. Over under is up from 49.5 to 51. So look, man, the Colts, that was a great win they had over the Titans. To me, that was the best game they've played all year, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, because this secondary has just been a situation where, I called them frauds before week 8 against the Lions, and that probably was too strong of a word. Again, for them to hold Ryan Tannehill to 147 passing yards, touchdown, and interception, when they have Darius Leonard and DeForest Buckner out there, that front 7 definitely becomes a real problem, and I think that kind of helps, their secondary that much more. And to the secondary's credit, I mean, this is the only defense in the league to contest at least 20% of their, opponent targets against. So they're making life difficult. With that said, I just don't think they've been tested by an attack quite like Aaron Rodgers and company to this point. Quickly going through their schedule. Week 1, Gardner Minshew completes 19 of 20 passes against the Colts. Week 2, awful Kirk Cousins game. Week 3, 4, 5, we get Sam Darnold, Nick Foles, and Baker Mayfield. Week 6, Burrow throws for over 300 yards. Week 8, Matthew Stafford throws for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Week 9, Lamar Jackson goes 19 for 23, and then we had the Tannehill down game. So, hey, you know what? We should give them credit for shutting down Kirk Cousins. I certainly, gave, a little bit of my opinion there too much on my thoughts on the Colts. So I get it. They have not been a bad unit. Fraudulent is not the right word, but don't be fading Aaron Rodgers and company because of a defensive matchup. Good offense beats good defense in the NFL, just like it does in basketball. And I just think that, Rodgers has been anyone's idea of a top 3 MVP candidate. It's almost like he set the bar so high for himself that, we're just not kind of glossing over these big games. I mean, I know he had the bad performance against the Buccaneers, but since then, I mean, he's thrown for at least 270 yards and 3+ total scores in each of the past 4 weeks. So, I mean, even in that windy game against the Jaguars last week, I mean, I think we were expecting 500 yards and so many touchdowns we couldn't even keep count. So when he ended up throwing for only 325 and he had the 2 passing scores and another rushing, it was almost underwhelming. But again, he's been awesome all season long. I'm not quite sure the Colts defense, is in that kind of top 5 spirit. A lot of the stats say they are. Fire up Aaron Rodgers as a top 4 QB this week, and Devontae Adams remains the overall wide receiver 1. Don't sweat Aaron Jones either. We know who the ball is going to in this offense. Only other point I'd say is, with Marquez Valdes-Scantling, he's been a boomer bust guy all year. He's been booming lately. I'd expect more bust once Alan Lazard returns, which it does seem to be fairly imminent. So Lazard will be the guy I want, moving on the rest of the year. Andrew, what's going on with Phillip Rivers and the Colts?
Yeah, man, I want to talk about this Colts backfield, and I really wish I could confidently say, all right, this is what's going to happen. This is how it's going to break down. It's going to be Jonathan Taylor. It's going to be Nyheim Hines. Again, it's really hard to project. Again, Nyheim Hines was the big winner on Thursday night. He was the guy that dominated the snaps, 39 touches, 17, 28.5 fantasy points, season high in touches and snaps. And basically, I was reading through, the coaches when they were talking. It was basically, Frank Reich was talking to the running backs coach, Tom Rathman, and basically he was like, yeah, no, Hines is on fire. Keep feeding this guy. And that's really how it is. They have 15 scripted plays for the running backs that, Reich goes through as they build the game plan for the week. And usually that's evolved around Jonathan Taylor and Wilkins. And then in this particular case, it then turns over to Rathman. And he's like, all right, well, I'm going to just go with the hot hand. So here, and that's what's going to happen here. So we're not going to necessarily know who the main running back is going to benefit from this superb matchup. Again, the Green Bay Packers, second most fantasy points per game allowed to the running back position, and a league high yards per target at 7.5. So Hines seems like always is the most involved pass catching back. I could see the Colts, trailing in this game because of the Packers' high-powered offense. So Hines, I guess, would still probably be my most confidence play again, but a lot of that's influenced by last week's performance. He doesn't do that. I don't know if I'd be saying this, but I would still put Hines as my number 1 guy. And then Jonathan Taylor, again, so one thing I'll note is, talk about how he gets plays early in the game, in the first quarter, first 15 plays. The Green Bay Packers have allowed the 3rd highest yards per attempt in the first quarter. So Jonathan Taylor is going to get a shot to potentially produce in that first drive. So I'm going to probably roll him out there because, again, we can't just be victims to, he didn't do anything last week. He didn't get any touches last week. It's going to be the same because they've literally told us, hey, we're going to change it up every single week. So the matchup is just too good. I think you got to roll with Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, man, it seems like every week people just want to try to crown someone else in this backfield. It was Jordan Wilkins after he had the big game out of the bye. Now it was Nyheim Hines after week 1. We don't know what's going on. It's a 3-back committee, to your point. I just did my, RB breakdown today, and the Colts section ended up being one of the shortest blurbs of the entire article because it's like, what a mess. We don't know. Yeah, I'm with you. Nyheim Hines would be my highest ranked back, but none of these guys are top 24 dudes because we don't know what's going to happen on a week-to-week basis. Last question here with this, though. Michael Pittman, are you buying him as someone moving forward? He had the big game on Thursday night. To me, it seemed like an awful lot of those yards kind of came on some busted covers, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's more or less who else are they going to throw the ball to? I mean, T.Y. Hilton, the experience is just kind of ran dry at this point. I don't know what he's even doing anymore. So, I mean, I'd rather have Pittman more than T.Y. Hilton. And if you look at the schedule for the Colts, it's like, it's pretty good. So, again, in this specific matchup of Jair Alexander's back, no way I'm going to probably be hands off of Michael Pittman. But I mean, he's got a couple good matchups. He got the Titans again. Matchup he obviously exploited, last week. So I like Mike Pittman, yeah.
So maybe the number one pass game option on the Colts, but maybe not a top 3 wide receiver type for Fantasyland. Sounds like the backfield a little bit. So, all right, good stuff. Moving on here, we got the Cowboys at the Vikings. Minnesota open as 9.5-point favorites, down to 7.5, seemingly because of the news that Andy Dalton will be back for the Cowboys. Over/under is down from 58 to 48, though. So, look, Ezekiel Elliott versus Tony Pollard. Zeke has obviously not been playing, the sort of like we would expect someone that's making $90 million to play running back to play this year. I would just note that, with the Zeke versus Tony Pollard comparison, you could put Tony Pollard on pretty much any other team in the league, and I think we'd be having the same conversation about him versus their starting running back. Like, Pollard is just freaking awesome, man. He's averaging 4.1 yards after contact per rush this year. That's like Nick Chubb level. I know he doesn't have the same, amount of carries, but we look back 2019, 2020, this guy's continuously popping at the top of, all of our elusive rating charts and, big plays and this and that. I mean, the dude is just great with the ball in his hands. And yeah, Zeke hasn't been as good as we need him to be. The fumbles are an entirely different issue. Hasn't been great as a receiver. But like, again, I just would caution people and, assuming it's okay to be in this, free Tony Pollard, like he's so great and all that. Just don't let one player's greatness make the other player like this scapegoat dumpster diver thing. Because Zeke, as bad as, it's been this year relative to expectations, come on, he's still anyone's idea of a great NFL running back. Is he top 10? We can have a conversation about it. And it's wild that we can do that. But again, just because expectations for a guy were top 5, just because he's top 10, top 12 instead, doesn't mean he's trash. So I would just say, chill out a little bit. Tony Pollard's awesome. He'd be awesome pretty much anywhere. We can talk about why they don't split up the usage and all that. But, I just think the Zeke hate has gotten pretty far to this point. And, to his credit, I mean, we see these guys and kind of I remember a couple years ago, they had that Broncos game in 2017. I think second game of the year, and Dak threw a pick, the guy housed it, and all week long on the radio it was just like, oh, watch Ezekiel Elliott on this play. The guy he just stood there, during an interception return, didn't even try to make a tackle. 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when they were playing the Eagles, when Zeke hurt his hamstring, it was because there was a fumble, and Zeke freaking ran 70 yards down the field to try to catch this dude who ended up scoring, but Zeke never quit on the play and ended up hurting himself because. So it would be really, really easy for Zeke or anyone else kind of in his shoes to let the frustration boil over. This has been a season that's been over for the Cowboys ever since Dak Prescott went down. Again, production hasn't been there, but let's realize all the problems that they've had in the passing game with the offensive line also apply to Zeke. Hardly been easy. Life has hardly been easy on him, and he's really kept his mouth shut and continued to put in the effort play by play. So, maybe this is my Ohio State homerism, coming out. I've loved watching Zeke over the years, guys, that national title back in 2014. But truly, I just think that be careful about who we're calling trash in the NFL, because Zeke has still achieved a lot, and I think he has not made the best out of this bad situation this year, but I think you would be hard pressed to find more than a few backs that would be doing too much better in this backfield. But yeah, not looking good against the Vikings because the Cowboys have scored Vikings have only allowed 22, 20, and 13 points since their week 7 bye. Their defense has been getting better. Cowboys, even with Dalton, man, we're looking at a bottom 3 offense in the entire league. So Zeke, he's a volume-based RB2. Expect Amari Cooper to be getting fed now with Dalton under center. But yeah, I mean, expectations still just in the bottom for this entire offense because when they can't block anybody, doesn't quite matter. Andrew, what's up with the Vikings?
Yeah, the Vikings come away with the win over the Chicago Bears. Monday Night Football. Absolutely loved it. Good revenge game by Cordell Patterson, but not enough to get the W. But okay, so Minnesota Vikings passing attack, they got back on track. Kirk Cousins played pretty well against Chicago. I think he's a good option this week off the waiver wire if you need a quarterback option. Dallas has allowed the league's second highest passer rating and the most passing touchdowns on passes thrown 20 or more yards downfield. Cousin leads the NFL in deep ball rate percentage this year. Again, that's how he's getting his touchdowns. It's deep passes to Adam Thielen. It's deep passes to Justin Jefferson. The only thing you're afraid of is that they just run the ball 40 times with Dalvin Cook and Kirk Cousins doesn't throw at all. Like, that's always going to be a risk, especially against the Dallas defense. But again, there are teams on bye. There are injuries at the quarterback position. I mean, it's not bad process to play a good quarterback against a bad defense. Like, that's basically what I'm saying here. So I think that Kirk Cousins is in a good spot. But don't come at me if they run the ball 35 times and Kirk Cousins only has 20 passing attempts. So okay, that could happen. Tight end Kyle Rudolph had a pretty solid game on Monday Night Football. 4-5 for a season high 63 yards. Finished as the tight end 12 because tight end is a hashtag dumpster fire. Irv Smith didn't play in this game, so if Irv Smith misses another week, Kyle Rudolph, it's a good matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. Again, Big D has allowed the 6th highest touchdown percentage to tight ends this season, and Kyle Rudolph loves himself some red zone touchdowns.
Cousins versus Jameis. Who would you rather start this week?
I'd probably start Jameis.
Ooh.
I like going for upside. I think that Jameis has more upside.
That's fair. I will go with Cousins. I think 2019 Jameis had the upside. We will see. It's a close one. Both guys are in pretty good spots this week for sure. Quick shout out to our sponsors before we keep on going. All first time depositors at Monkey Knife Fight that put at least $20 in their account while using promo code PFF will receive a free PFF Edge annual subscription. That's a $40 value for just $20, people, and you'll get the opportunity to turn that $20 into even more money playing daily fantasy and prop games at one of the fastest growing fantasy sports sites in the USA, and Monkey Knife Fight. So go to Monkey Knife Fight. Deposit your $20 with promo code PFF today to receive your free PFF Edge annual subscription. Love the fine folks at Monkey Knife Fight. All right, 2 more games on the docket here. We got Sunday Night Football, Chiefs at the Raiders. All 3 primetime games this week, looking good. You love to see it. The spread sitting at KC -6.5, and the over-under is at 56. So, we've seen Russell Wilson struggling in recent weeks. Aaron Rodgers had to let down against the Buccaneers. Talked about him still playing really well recently, but I feel like the hype hasn't been quite as strong there. I think we're starting to look at the stretch where Patrick Mahomes can run away with the MVP, and it's almost like he's already kind of reached this like LeBron James fatigue of just voters not wanting to vote for the guy, even though he's only been starting now. This is his 3rd year. Like, it's absolutely wild just how kind of used to Mahomes' greatness we've already gotten, because he's really having, almost not identical year to what he had in 2020, but and this year, 2018, this year his PFF passing grade is at 89.6. In 2018, it was 82.8. He's averaging 8.2 yards per attempt this year. Is at 8.5 in 2018. His QB rating is actually higher than it was in 2018. He's been just a hair less accurate in terms of adjusted completion rates. So it's been a step up from what we saw in 2019. And again, 25 touchdowns versus just 1 interception. He's got the counting numbers to his name as well. So my favorite thing about all this, man, is that he's done so in style. Just 3% of Mahomes' pass attempts all year have been on checkdowns. That's the 5th lowest rate among 35 QBs with at least 100 pass attempts. So, this Raiders team, like, they held the Chiefs to 32 points back in week 5. But in fantasy, it's just wild how it doesn't really matter with Mahomes, because even in the rare situations where a team can maybe get a lead on him and, force Mahomes to look human for a half, like, this guy is just the comeback mode god. We just rarely see him, in that situation. But once he starts running around and has to put his foot on the gas, look out. So, if you're concerned about this Raiders team, captured that win in Arrowhead, don't be, because you cannot think of a game script that really, is bad for Mahomes. The biggest worry we have about him on a week-to-week basis is like, will he just score 30 or 40 points too quickly, and maybe, he doesn't account for the touchdowns. We've seen them throwing the ball really to Mahomes' heart's desire over these past few weeks. I do think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is, the guy you want in the backfield and you can treat as, this RB2, but unfortunately, I think, the pipe dream of him being a top 5, top 6 RB, just not going to be there. That is life, with Le'Veon and even Darrell Williams staying a little bit involved just in this pass first offense. So Mahomes, Tyreek, Kelsey, Sammy Watkins maybe coming back, if you're feeling real spicy. But no, I think we're just sticking at the top and appreciate those guys' greatness, and that is about it. Andrew, what's going on with Derek Carr and company? And don't be talking any smack about his performance last week, because as I told everyone, 2 dropped touchdowns, another dropped deep ball. I am inexplicably, the leader of the Carr 2020 bandwagon. So be careful here, Andrew.
Yeah, I have all good things about Derek Carr, listed out here. But if I miss anything, feel free to stop me, interrupt me, and just add in any other Derek Carr comments that you may have. So Derek Carr leads all quarterbacks in PFF passing grade over the past 2 weeks. Hasn't translated to fantasy success because they've been running the ball at the 3rd highest rate in the NFL, the last 2 weeks. Basically, they haven't had to pass. They've been using Josh Jacobs, Devontae Booker, to my dismay, as a Josh Jacobs manager in a lot of leagues, but that's okay. They're not going to be able to do that against the Chiefs. They can try. The Chiefs' weakness is definitely on the ground, but like you alluded to, it doesn't matter. Patrick Mahomes is going to push the ball. He's going to score real life points, which is going to mean Derek Carr is going to have to push the ball. It's what we saw last time. Carr threw for 347 yards and 3 touchdown passes the last time these teams met in Week 5. An aerial attack from the Las Vegas Raiders might actually get Henry Ruggs back into fantasy relevance. He leads the team in air yards over the past 3 weeks, and like you've talked about before, he's just missing a few big plays here and there. It seems like every single week there's a big deep ball to Henry Ruggs that he just drops, or he's just out of bounds, or they don't call it a touchdown. Like, he's had those opportunities. Again, it's been very far and few between. He's not getting a lot of targets, but if he's ever going to have a boom game, we got all these boom bust wide receivers. This would be the spot. The Kansas City Chiefs have faced the second highest deep ball attempt percentage this season among all teams. So, and Ruggs' only big game this year has come against the Chiefs. 2 catches for 118 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah, the one thing about Ruggs that you gotta love, even if he's not putting up the sort of production that we would have hoped for, he is the guy that has, I think, helped Derek Carr start to throw the ball downfield more often. Since Henry Ruggs returned in Week 5, Carr has an average target depth of 9.2 yards. That's tied for the 9th highest mark among 39 QBs with at least 25 dropbacks in the sample. Since Week 5, Derek Carr is throwing downfield more often than Josh Allen. You absolutely love to see it, and hopefully that will start to turn to more fantasy production. To your point,
So would you start Derek Carr or Jameis Winston or Kirk Cousins?
Ooh, I would go Carr over all 3. I don't think I have any of them ranked. Let me see. Carr's my highest ranked. I have him as my QB 14, Cousins QB 15, Jameis QB 19.
Yeah, I'd go with Carr too.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I know it hasn't been there the last couple of weeks, but Carr, even with this slowing down, he has more games with 250 passing yards and multiple scores this year than he did all of last season. Like, it hasn't been there recently, but we have seen earlier in the year more boom performances from him in Fantasyland, particularly against his Chiefs defense. So at a minimum, we shouldn't have the same volume concerns that we've seen in these past weeks. Moving on to Monday Night Football, we got the Rams at the Buccaneers. Tampa Bay sitting us 3.5-point favorites, over under at 48.5. So really interesting usage for the better part of the last few months in this wide receiver room, because going in this year when they lost Brandon Cooks, we definitely were just kind of assuming that it was going to be the Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods show, and it has been to an extent. But you look, Van Jefferson was kind of splitting snaps with Josh Reynolds in the first 2 weeks, but Reynolds played 90% of snaps in Week 3, and since then has been the guy. So since Week 3, here's been the targets: Cooper Kupp with 64, then Josh Reynolds with 44, Robert Woods with 43, Gerald Everett 27, and Tyler Higbee 21. So the tight end usage, I think we all realize, is really split between Higbee and Everett at this point. But truly, Reynolds hasn't even just been so much as a hot just last couple 2-3 week stretch. He's been doing this for quite a while now, and I get that Robert Woods, he's getting the rush attempts. Like, we can expect more total opportunities for him than Reynolds on a week-to-week basis, but either way, I mean, this is a passing offense that Goff has finally had to put his foot on the gas over the past 2 weeks, and they've been throwing a little bit more often. But, they might have to do that again against the Buccaneers this week. But moving forward, man, if trade deadline hasn't come in your league, you can still kind of sell Robert Woods potentially as a wide receiver too. Might not be a bad idea, because we've been talking all year about treating Woods and Kupp more as wide receiver 2s than wide receiver 1s because of the overall lack of volume in the passing game, because it's been so concentrated with them, or at least because we thought it was, it was still okay to fire them up. But now, man, with 3 wide receivers in a run-first offense that isn't making a habit of throwing downfield, we cannot take that. So, unfortunately, it's just as crowded in the backfield, man. Like, none of Henderson, Akers, Brown. We can't treat any of these guys as top 24 options this week. It is truly just a dreaded 3-headed committee. They don't trust Akers enough on passing downs. So, Malcolm Brown is pretty much not seeing any work other than passing downs and short yardage, which is, coincidentally the most fantasy-friendly opportunities we could hope for out of anyone. So, absolute mess. Thank you, I guess, Sean McVay, for telling us this was going to be the case throughout the summer, but also, screw you, man, for not giving us the usual fantasy-friendly running back we get out of your offense. So it sucks that, we have this, one of the brightest, young offensive minds, and we just almost can't find, a single consistent fantasy guy out of the offense. It's Cooper Kupp, I understand that, but it does suck that, we just haven't gotten more clarity out of this Rams offense, and here we are entering Week 11, still having, kind of no idea what's going on with the complementary pass catchers and the backfield. So maybe we'll be having a different conversation next week, but for now, just really approach this Rams offense with caution. Andrew, what's up with TB12, AB, Bruce Arians, and the high-flying Bucks?
Yeah, Josh Reynolds was someone that I noticed a lot because of the high value opportunities article I write every single week, because he was seeing a high percentage of the team's end zone targets. He was seeing a high percentage of the team's deep targets and air yards, and that was something that Robert Woods was just not getting. So he was getting targets, but they were never in the end zone. They were never downfield, and that was ultimately hindering his fantasy ceiling. And as we saw, Josh Reynolds has filled in that deep threat role that Brandon Cooks was operating as, and that gave Brandon Cooks a lot of upside in that offense. So, yeah, I totally agree with you about Robert Woods and, trying to sell him. And The Rams running backs, yeah, they're a mess. And I guess I'd probably just, flipping over to the Bucks, I'd probably start Ronald Jones all over any of those guys. Just the fact of the matter, he's looked really good. He only plays in a 2-man back committee as opposed to a 3-man back committee. So you have that, that works in the favor of Ronald Jones. And again, he's the RB8 overall through the first 10 weeks of the season. Again, the Bucks haven't had their bye week, so it is inflated slightly. He's averaging 14.1 fantasy points per game, which ranks 20th. So again, he's been a solid RB2 all year long, despite some of the lulls that he's had with Fournette working in. But again, whoever the Tampa Bay Buccaneer running back is, they've averaged the top score from that backfield has averaged an RB17 finish throughout the first 10 weeks of the year. So whoever you start is going to probably finish pretty well because this team scores a lot of points. They all see, both Ronald Jones and Fournette see touches near the goal line, so they both have opportunities to score. Again, Ronald Jones is going to be my highest ranked guy, but last week, Leonard Fournette was my highest ranked guy. Like, I'm not going to lie to you and say that he wasn't because he got the touches the week before. So again, I don't want to be, chasey with these touches, but what else are we supposed to do, Ian? I think that I'm doing the right thing, but I would still play Ronald Jones in this matchup. Again, it's tough against the Rams, but at worst, at least he can probably score a touchdown because their offense is going to be able to move the ball. Tom Brady, again, I don't love him in this matchup. The Rams shut down Russell Wilson last week. He was one of the best quarterbacks in fantasy. So Brady is not, impenetrable to bad defense or to good defenses. He's struggled in tough matchups so far this year, even with Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, and Chris Godwin. I think Godwin is probably the one I would favor in this matchup just because he's not going to see Ramsey in the other outside corner as much as he's going to see Troy Hill. Ian, I know you like Antonio Brown a lot long-term, but do you agree with me Chris Godwin is the matchup in this particular game?
Yeah, we'll see. The thing with Ramsey is he's been playing a little more outside corner in recent weeks, but they've been moving him really all around the formation throughout the year. So the Rams have done a really good job just disguising their defense week after week. I don't know that anyone really knows what's coming on a week-to-week basis. So, hey, it's going to be a tougher matchup, but I just think that, the Buccaneers, they scored 46 points last week, and Brady missed legit, 2 50-plus yard touchdowns and also some Mike Evans red zone targets. So the fact that, he can throw for over 340 yards and have 3 scores in the game where he didn't even play his best, I still think, even if it is, not the quite high-end target share we want from any one receiver, there's going to be enough, kind of scoring upside to go around that. All 3 of these guys should be in more fancy lineups or not. And then, I'm with you on Ronald Jones. It's just interesting that, it's a 2-back backfield, but neither guy really has a floor because it just kind of ends up shifting to one or the other. So they truly are, Rojo especially, is that boomer bust RB2, and Fournette's kind of a boomer bust RB3. And, they do have that boom. I think sometimes we overuse that phrase, boomer bust, and sometimes, if a guy has such a high bust potential, they really don't have a boom in their, range of outcomes as well. But that is the case in Tampa Bay, whereas, a situation like Cleveland is 2 backs that are like 50-50 and they're using them both. Tampa Bay ends up just leaning towards one, 75-25. So, hey, at least, LaShawn McCoy and Keyshawn Vaughn are out of the picture. But, man, yeah, this has been a tough situation. Rojo was benched in week 2 after he fumbled and in week 8 after he fumbled. This time he fumbles and Bruce Arians is like, oh, no, I got your back, man. No worries at all. So we'll see, man. But, yeah, I don't think, any particularly clear clarity coming out of Tampa Bay.
He told him that he would only get his job. He'd only stay in the game if he ran for a 98-yard touchdown. So
I guess so. Good on you, Rojo. I know he's been their best runner all year. Like, I don't, I sent out a tweet like after that, mocking like, oh, how Rojo's never going to be back on the field again after that fumble. And I was getting, some old takes exposed. Like, no, I want Rojo to be out there. Like, he's been their best running back all year. I'm commentating on what Bruce Arians has been doing for the better part of these past 2 years with it. So infuriating, and as we've learned this year, do not trust anything Bruce Arians says.
Well, I will say, at least with Bruce Arians, he's turned a new leaf over with Antonio Brown. Maybe he's turned a new leaf over with Ronald Jones. Maybe he's looked in the mirror and he's like, you know what? I'm going to keep you in the game. I'm going to give you another chance. If you fumble, I'm going to go back to you because you're our best runner. Maybe.
I hope so. All right, everyone, that's going to do it. Thank you, as always, for listening to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. And thank you, Andrew, for giving some of your valuable time to the podcast and to myself. Let the people know where they can find you and what you got on the docket for this week.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Andrew Erickson _. All of my written content is over on PFF.com, and I have a new article coming out every Saturday, Injury Report Cheat Sheet. So basically breaking down all the injuries, but including things like defensive injuries and offensive line injuries, we don't really talk about them that much, but they make big impacts on certain games. If a key offensive lineman is out, it can make a really big impact on how well that quarterback can play in that game. And we have PFF, we have grades on linemen and defensive players, so we can actually quantify their loss as opposed to, the starting, tackle's out, so the next one's probably worse. Like, in most cases, that's the choice, but, how much worse are they? We really want to quantify it so you can make the best choices.
Andrew, I've never asked you about this, but look, my Twitter handle was pretty easy to find. Not many people have tits in their last name, but Andrew Erickson. So have you ever reached out to the Andrew Erickson that doesn't have an underscore in the Twitter handle to try to make that your own?
Yeah, they're non-negotiable about giving it up. So.
Oh, that is hilarious. All right, well, good luck. And if if that Andrew Erickson no underscore is out there listening to this podcast, give him the benefit of the doubt. We'll see. Thank you all for listening. This has been the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. You can find me on Twitter at iHartitz with a Z at the end of that. So thank you as always for listening. And until next time, take care, everybody.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.